I've been wanting to do this video for a little bit. Sorry, I hope I'm not shaking the camera. Okay, let me start over. I've been wanting to do this video for a little bit. Well, I've been planning it since before I was done watching this show, Longmire. It was a show that started off on A&E, and then halfway through its run, it got picked up by Netflix. And honestly, it's a series that got better as it progressed, which is kind of, it's not common for that to happen. A lot of times shows will just kind of peter out. They get weak, the writing gets weaker. But this show, I think it got better because, not that it was ever really bad, but when it moved to Netflix, it didn't have the constraints of time that were placed on it by it being on a network. So they didn't have to account for commercials and things like that, and they could just let the writing flow and let the episode breathe. So that helped it a lot, as far as I'm concerned. I think it was great that Netflix picked it up. They wrapped the story up at the end of season 6. I think it was a good place to end it. I don't think it could have gone on much longer. All of the major plot points were kind of tied together, and there was a resolution that was reached. And I felt like the final shot of the series was perfect because it was something that came back around to sort of a running joke about his character in the series. Anyway, I'm not going to get into too much spoilery stuff if I can help it, just in case you guys haven't read the books or seen the series. The author of the books is, I think his name is Craig Johnson, and I started listening to the books after I had started watching the show. I'm pretty sure that was the sequence of events. And so one of the things I want to do in this video is to touch on the similarities and the differences between the books and the show. I am not done with the books. There are several more ahead of me, so bear in mind I might be a little inaccurate when I mention certain things, but I think I've read enough of the books to kind of have a pretty solid grasp on the differences and the similarities. So I'm going to talk about the similarities first. This is stuff I just came up with off the top of my head. I did make little lists. I came up with a list off the top of my head. I didn't do much investigating. If I have little errors here and there in some of the stuff I say, I'm sorry. This is just me talking. This is what I would be saying to you if we were face to face. Okay, so here we go. The main characters in the books are pretty much the same in the show. For instance, we have Walt Longmire, who is a sheriff in Absaroka County, Wyoming. It's a made-up county. It's in the area where there's also an Indian reservation. I can't remember what tribe or what group they are, but there's constant sort of conflicts that go on between his law enforcement officers and also the law enforcement officers on the reservation, the little sort of bickering that they get into over jurisdiction and stuff. So that's kind of sort of the synopsis of the show. So the main character, Walt Longmire, as I mentioned, and his daughter, Katie Longmire, is in both of the books and the series. Victoria Vic Moretti, she is also in both. Henry Standing Bear is in both, and Ruby the receptionist. These are some of the major characters that are pretty solid throughout the books and the show. Some plot points or some plot lines or plot things that happen in the books do show up in the series. Now, like I said, I'm not done, so it's very possible there are several more from the books that I've already witnessed in the series that I just didn't realize it was from the books, but they have a lot of new material or different material that's not in the books that shows up in the series show. So now I'm going to touch on some of the differences and, well, with respect to characters. One of the characters that works in the sheriff's office, his name is Ferg. He's called Ferg, and then they start to call him Archie, which I think maybe Archie is his first name and maybe Ferguson is his last name, and so they just called him Ferg for short. So I just think of him as Ferg, even though he was referred to as Archie. I did see somewhere mentioned that he was in the books early on and he just kind of fades away. Well, he must have faded away so much that I ended up forgetting he was even in the books completely. He is definitely more prominent in the series. So that's one of the characters that I had initially put in my he's not in the book list, but I'm mistaken about that. Some other characters that I do not believe show up in the book at all that are pretty prominent in the TV show were Branch Connolly, who's one of the deputies, and Barlow Connolly, who is Branch's father. Jacob Nighthorse, who is someone who he's like this rich business guy, and he owns and runs this casino in the area. There's a lot of friction between Jacob Nighthorse and Walt Longmire. Walt Longmire suspects Jacob of everything under the sun, and they are constantly, I mean, they're just it's this constant friction between them. The interaction between them is pretty interesting, and both of their characters are interesting. Also, Matthias, who is a cop on the reservation. He's a little short Indian guy with long, straight black hair. He very quickly became one of my favorite characters in the show. The way he played his character, that guy right there, to the left of Lou Diamond Phillips. And there he is again, to the left. The way he played, and there he is again. Okay, that wasn't intentional that he was going to show up exactly as I was talking about him. But the way he played his character, I loved him. He was fun to watch. I enjoyed every moment that he was on the screen. There was something about his like sarcastic, snarky, sort of just very cynical type of reaction to the people he was interacting with in the situation. He was great. He is not, from what I can tell, in the series. In the books. Malachi Strand, he was played by Graham Greene. It showed him just a little bit ago. It'll come back around to him. He is someone who had been a cop. He was a crooked cop, and he causes all sorts of trouble. His story weaves through pretty much the entire series, off and on. I mean, he comes and goes, but he's sort of a constant presence, a constant problem. He's like the big bad, one of the big bads in the series. So I do not believe that he was in the books at all. And then Darius, who was his henchman, basically. Hector, just a character named Hector, who was ultimately a vigilante for the Indians on the reservation to help them be able to get justice where the law couldn't or wouldn't provide it, whether it was white man's law or the Indians' law. So he also plays a pretty important role throughout the course of the story, and I don't want to say too much about him because there's all these things that go on with his name, and you'll know what I mean when you get to that. And then also another character named Donna Sue Monahan. I think that was her name. She is not in the books from what I can recall. She plays one of the love interests of Walt Longmire. There is another girl who plays a love interest of his, but she's only in a few episodes. The character of Donna was also only in a few, but in more than the other lady. So some of the other things that are also different between the two is that, from what I can tell, the series focuses a lot more on issues surrounding the reservation and the people and the conflicts and the balancing act that the characters have to play with each other. Let's say Walt, and then also Matthias, the cop on the reservation, and Walt, who's the sheriff for Absaroka County. This constant sort of back and forth and conflict and cooperation that goes on between them, that shows up a lot, much more than what I can remember is going on in the books. There is not much talk so far of the reservation and things like that. Also, many of the major plot points in the show, the stuff involving Malachi, and also the stuff involving Branch Connolly's father. And then there is also a subplot that involves a kind of like I can't remember the gentleman who plays this guy. I don't even remember his name, but he shows up quite a few times throughout the course of the show. And he's kind of like what do they call those people that almost like survivalists, sort of, or they want to separate themselves from the government, and he's got his land and his family, and he considers his land as, he feels like he's got the right to shoot anybody who trespasses on his land. He basically doesn't honor or recognize, hold on a second. He basically doesn't honor or respect or obey the law of the land, except when it is to his benefit and his protection. And the guy who plays him does a really good job. He's a bad dude, but he's also, so far, not in the books. Anybody out there who's watching this, if you are super familiar with both, like super familiar, more than me, if I'm wrong about any of these characters or subplots, let me know. It's also very possible that I just haven't gotten to them yet. Like I said, maybe I just haven't reached that part in the books. I think I've read or listened to maybe 9 or 11 books. I accidentally jumped from one book. I jumped over 2 books to out of order. So now I've got to go back and listen to those 2 that I accidentally jumped over. Also, some plot situations in the books have been altered a bit. Like, let's say they show up in the series, but they've been tweaked a bit. One is what happened to Walt's wife. In the books, she died from cancer, and there's nothing really more that comes of that. You just know that because he is already a widower when the book series starts, I'm pretty sure. And his wife had died from cancer, and that's it. But in the show, that's not what his wife dies from. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want to get into too much spoilery territory. She definitely had a different demise in the show, and that plays a prominent part in the first season especially. It might even stretch into the second season. I can't remember for sure. Maybe in second and third season, sort of elements of that are still weaving their way through those other seasons. Also, the relationship between Vic and Walt, very different between the two. I don't want to get into spoilery territory, but I'll just say that things progress a little bit differently in the books than they do in the TV series between those 2 characters. What else? Going through my little quick notes that I made. Oh yes, some of the interactions between the characters in the books are much more humorous compared to the way they interact with each other in the series. Walt Longmire, in the series, he is a man of few words. He's not into small talk. He's very stoic. He doesn't smile a lot. When he smiles, it's almost odd because he doesn't do it a lot. He's very, very serious and not super talkative. And in the books, because the books are written in first person Walt Longmire perspective, he's much more humorous. He's got a very dry sense of humor and style of wording things. And his interactions with Vic in the books are more humorous. They're more... definitely Vic is a lot more spitfiery in the books than she is in the series. And she says whatever's on her mind, and she does not hold back. And she's so crazy in the books. In the TV show, she's a little bit more held back as far as she's still very sassy and got attitude, and she says for the most part what's on her mind, but it feels like she's dialed back a little bit. Maybe because if she acted exactly the same way in the series, it might not transfer over so well. She might not come across in a very likable way. But in the books, it's different. And there's just something about the way she's written. She doesn't come across as unlikable to me, but it might not work well on the screen if she were that way. Also, the interactions between Walt and Henry. Now, in the show, Henry is played by Lou Diamond Phillips. Walt and Henry are lifelong friends. They've known each other since like grade school or something. And they're very good friends throughout both. That doesn't change. What's different is that Henry is also more comedic and humorous, and their interaction is more playful, but it's playful, but it's not silly playful. It's subdued playful and funny. In the series show, it's sometimes their banter can be a little bit playful, but not really. Usually that's on Henry's end if he's being a little bit sarcastic about something that Walt has said or done, and Henry's kind of trying to point out that it was sort of ridiculous or whatever. It's hard to describe. It's hard to put it into words. When you immerse yourself into both, you would know what I'm talking about. I'm just kind of giving you a glossed over sort of picture. What else? Walt's daughter, who is very prominent in the series. She is in the books, but she is really not around much, to be honest. She's not even living in the same state at the point of time that I am at in the books right now. She's often like Philly or something like that. So I like the way they used his daughter's character in here. The role that she played, the interaction, complicated relationship that she has with her dad. Sometimes it's complicated. It's not awful. Like, the friction between them isn't awful, but sometimes they run into problems with each other because she's a lawyer. She represents people that sometimes maybe he wants to get at, but because she's kind of in the way, it creates this odd tension. She is also very much immersed and enmeshed and ingrained with the reservation, because at some point she runs like a little pro bono law practice there. So she's just in there a lot. I don't want to say every episode, but she is in most of them. And she happens to be played, that's her right there. She happens to be played by, oh gosh, what's her name? Cassidy Freeman, who is the sister of prominent voice actor Crispin Freeman, who played Helsing. Well, he didn't play Helsing. He played Alucard in the anime series Helsing, and he's also played in a whole bunch of other anime stuff. And he also had a voice acting class with Aurelia one time. That was her Christmas gift a few years back. Also, something else that you can't help but notice when you're watching the series is the scenery. Because of the visual medium of video, you are treated to absolutely spectacular and gorgeous scenery throughout the show. A lot of the stuff takes place inside at the Red Pony, which is the bar that Henry runs, inside Walt's house, inside the sheriff's office, inside other places. But you also see a bunch of outside scenery. The place that's especially beautiful is where Walt lives, outside of his front porch. The view, oh my gosh, it's just gorgeous. And they filmed this in New Mexico. It's supposed to take place in Wyoming. So I don't know how much of the scenery that we are seeing is real, how much has been digitally added, or how much of it's just like maybe one of those canvas backdrops that they throw down. My brother told me about this a while back, that they just, throw it down way far in the background so it looks like it's real, actual scenery, outside scenery, when it's not. But whatever, it really does give you this nice, warm, fuzzy, homey atmosphere. I got to where I really, really liked the environment, especially the sheriff's office. I was like, that is the coolest little place to work. It's just a simple little wood inside, like wood floors, wood paneling, and simple desks and one jail cell. That's it. But it was just so comfy the way it was put together. So, and also you see it so much, you're exposed to it. So that's the guy who plays Jacob, gosh, what's his name? Jacob Nighthorse? Yeah. AJ Martinez, I think that's his name. Anyway, what I was saying is the atmosphere, the environment, it's just, it almost becomes like family after a while. And you really get to know these characters pretty well. And the way they interact with each other is fun to watch. Same with the books, You don't have as much of a sort of comfortable, homey feel from the books, or I don't, because it feels like in a lot of ways the books are more sparse as far as that goes. And so while I enjoy the books a lot and I enjoy the character interactions, I don't have as much of a feel for the way things are in their environment as I do from watching the show. Obviously, I mean, that's just, when you're listening to a book or reading a book, you have to come up with what things look like yourself. So by the time I started listening to the books, I had already started watching the series, so I could sort of fill in a lot of these visual pictures myself based on what I knew from the show. Anyway, as a whole, I really enjoy this series. I'm glad that even though, yes, the show has run its course and it was done very well and it knew when it was time to stop and it didn't just go on and on and on, I'm glad that I still have the books, many books ahead of me to continue to. There's the guy who plays Malachi Strand, one of the big bads, like I said. I'm glad that I have several books ahead of me that I can still enter Walt's world and kind of hang out with him and his friends and go on these little sort of crime-solving adventures that he goes on. And I think that if you like things like maybe a Western type environment, I say West, but it's kind of like, you know what I mean, out there in the West, that type of environment, kind of a rugged sort of place, because they live in it. It's not like this big, huge, bustling city. It's a tiny little town, and it's a small, it's just, it's kind of like, it's just a different type of, it's not like, let's say, what was the name of that, NYPD Blue or whatever, doesn't take place in in an environment like that. It's a completely different, more slower paced life, and so things are just different. If you like that sort of environment, if you like, let's say, cop sort of stories or detective or crime type of stories or shows, you would probably enjoy this. I mean, I went into the show not expecting to like it as much as I did. When I started watching it, I did enjoy it. I wasn't super crazy about it, but I did enjoy it enough to start listening to the books. And then as I was listening to the books and watching the show, and then Netflix picked it up from season 4 to 6, it got so much better, like I said, that I really got more and more and more into it. And I had watched one season with Netflix, so I'd watched 4 seasons. And then when it came around to season 5, maybe I only watched 1 episode of that, maybe. And then I kind of, for whatever reason, I just drifted away from it because I got distracted by other things. And so then my mother and I started watching the show, and because it had been so long since I had seen it, I went back to the very beginning with her and we watched it together from the beginning to the end, and she really enjoyed it a lot, and it's got pretty high marks from what I understand from critics or whatever, and the audience. I think the audience really enjoyed it a lot, and if any of you guys have seen it already, if you have read all the books, let me know what you think about the two of them, the differences and the similarities, and which you like better. I can't say which I like better, honestly. I like some aspects of the books more than the show, but also I like some aspects of the show more than the books. It's like they just fit well together. And I really can't pick between them, honestly. I just can't. It's just not one of those situations where I'm like, oh, the books are so much better. Not in this case. They're both solid, and I had an absolute blast watching this series, and I'm sure I'll enjoy continuing to listen to the books. I don't know if there is a conclusion to the series yet, because it seems to me like it is still ongoing. But I might be wrong, because I'm so far, like I said, I think maybe it's like what? How many books are in the series? Like maybe 18, 19? It's on up there, and I'm maybe around book 9 to 11, like I said. So several ahead of me. Anyway, I can't think of anything else, honestly. I'm sure once I stop recording, I will remember something that I forgot. I'll just put it in text if I remember it while I'm editing. But one of the main reasons that I had these notes sort of, or like a guide to remind me what to talk about, is because I have to actually leave pretty soon, and I didn't want to chatter on and on and on and on and lose track of time. I have gone through everything that I meant to mention.
Okay, so I actually forgot one thing I was going to bring up, which was something involving the character of his daughter. If I had any complaint about the show, it would be what took place with his daughter right at the very end. It didn't feel like a proper fit for her character, and so that part didn't work so well, in my opinion. But that's a minor issue and does not detract from the show as a whole.
So I believe I'm done. So I'm going to wrap this up now, you guys. Adios.